Stop calling them acts of God. That phrase is a coping mechanism we use to absolve ourselves of the physics. When a building collapses, it isn't bad luck. It is a calculation of sheer force versus masonry strength. When a flood drowns a driver, it isn't destiny. It is the specific interaction between buoyancy and friction. The world treats natural disasters as chaotic, random events where survival is a lottery ticket. The data says otherwise. Who lives and who dies is determined by a brutal but predictable equation: hazard plus exposure plus vulnerability. If you understand the variables, you can manipulate the outcome. If you treat it like a roll of the dice, you are already a statistic. Today, we are stripping away the cinema and looking at the hard science of catastrophe. We aren't talking about how to survive a movie script. We are talking about the biology of heat stroke, the engineering of seismic waves, and the sociology of who actually gets into the lifeboats. This is the difference between panic and protocol. Let's define the battlefield. Risk is not just the storm on the horizon. It is a three-part structure. First, the hazard. This is the kinetic event, the shaking ground, the rising water, the wall of fire. You usually cannot change this. Second is exposure. This is simple geography. Are you standing in the floodplain? Is your apartment on top of an unstable slope? Are you in the path of the debris flow? Third, and most critical, is vulnerability. This is the fragility of your system. It is your age, your health, the quality of the steel in your building's frame, and the speed of the ambulance that might effectively not exist when the roads are cut. The science shows that while we fixate on the hazard, the scary monster on the news, it is actually exposure and vulnerability that kill us. You can survive a massive hazard if your exposure is zero. You can die from a minor hazard if your vulnerability is maximum. Understanding this distinct triad is the only way to prioritize your survival. Before we simulate the first disaster, you need to decide if you want access to the full briefing on grid-down scenarios coming later. Secure your spot by subscribing now. The data stream doesn't stop. Imagine you are sitting in a coffee shop in a dense urban center. It is a Tuesday. The first sign isn't a sound. It's a sensation. A sudden, sharp jolt, like a truck hitting the building. That is the P wave, the primary compressional wave squeezing through the Earth's crust at miles per second. It is the warning shot. You look up from your phone. The barista stops pouring. For 2 seconds, there is silence. Then the S wave arrives. This is the shear wave. The floor doesn't just vibrate, it heaves laterally. The glass front of the shop explodes inward, not from impact, but because the frame it sits in has twisted into a rhombus. Bookshelves detach from the walls. The ceiling tiles dissolve into a white powder. The roar is deafening, the sound of concrete grinding against steel. You are no longer in a room, you are inside a mechanical agitator. Gravity seems to fluctuate. This is not a drill. This is a magnitude 7.8 shallow crustal rupture, and the physics of your immediate environment are being rewritten. In that moment of violence, your primitive brain takes over. It screams one command: run. You see people scrambling for the exit, stumbling over overturning chairs. You see someone else stand in a doorway, bracing themselves against the frame, just like they were told in some outdated pamphlet from the 1970s. Both of these reactions are statistically likely to get you killed. Trying to run during peak ground acceleration is physically impossible. The ground is moving faster than your equilibrium can process. You will fall, and you will be trampled or hit by falling debris. And the doorway? In modern construction, the doorway is no stronger than the rest of the wall, and it exposes you to the swinging door itself and the collapsing facade outside. Research shows that the majority of injuries in earthquakes don't come from the building flattening like a pancake. They come from non-structural failures. Lights, glass, facades, and furniture becoming projectiles. The people running are targets. The people in the doorway are exposed. They are playing by rules that physics rendered obsolete decades ago. The engineering consensus is absolute. The survival protocol is drop, cover, and hold on. You drop to your hands and knees immediately. This lowers your center of gravity and prevents the quake from knocking you down. You cover your head and neck, ideally getting your entire body under a sturdy table or desk. This creates a geometric shield against falling ceiling tiles and light fixtures. Then, you hold on to the leg of that shelter, moving with it as the floor shakes. This isn't about dignity, it is about reducing your surface area. Unreinforced masonry buildings are death traps. If you are in one, your risk skyrockets. But in a modern reinforced structure, the building is designed to flex. Your enemy is the internal contents. Science tells us that most people hurt in developed nations during quakes are hit by their own belongings. By anchoring yourself to the floor under a shield, you remove yourself from the trajectory of the debris field. It is a simple mechanical countermeasure to a chaotic kinetic event. But here is where the timeline splits. In a region with an Earthquake Early Warning System, or EEWS, the scenario changes. Sensors near the fault line detect that initial P wave seconds before the destructive S wave hits your coffee shop. Algorithms calculate the intensity. A signal moves at the speed of light, faster than the seismic wave moving through rock. Your phone screams a specific alert tone 10 seconds before the shaking starts. It seems like magic, but it is just physics. In those 10 seconds, automated systems have already saved thousands of lives. Gas valves shut. Elevators dock at the nearest floor. High-speed trains slam on emergency brakes to prevent derailment. You have 10 seconds of clarity to drop, cover, and hold on before the violence begins. This technology exists, but only in about half the world's seismically active nations. If you don't know if your region has it, or if you ignore the alert because you think it's a test, you are discarding the single greatest survival advantage modern science has given us. Shift the scene. You are in a suburban neighbourhood. It has been raining for 3 days. The ground is saturated, a sponge that cannot hold another drop. The local creek, usually a trickle, is a roaring brown snake. You are in your car trying to get home. The road ahead dips into a low spot. Water is flowing across the asphalt. It doesn't look deep, maybe 6 inches, ankle deep. The surface is rippling, but you can see the yellow line on the other side. You have a heavy SUV, 4-wheel drive, high clearance. You feel safe inside your 2-ton metal box. The rain is drumming on the roof, isolating you from the roar of the water. You ease your foot off the brake. You think you are a driver navigating a road. In reality, you are a captain, piloting a boat that wasn't designed to float. You enter the water. For the first 10 feet, it feels fine. Then, the steering wheel goes light in your hands. The engine note changes as the exhaust pipe submerges. You have just made a fatal calculation error. This is the most common way people die in floods. Driving into water. The psychology is deceptive. We judge the hazard by the depth, but we should be judging it by the force. You thought the vehicle's weight would hold you down. You forgot about displacement. As soon as the water reaches the bottom of the chassis, your car becomes a buoy. It loses contact with the road. Now you are at the mercy of the current. It only takes 12 inches of moving water to carry away a small car. 2 feet will sweep away most trucks and SUVs. Once the tyres lose friction, you aren't driving. You are floating downstream toward a culvert or a river. Panic sets in. You try to open the door, but the water pressure against the outside metal is thousands of pounds. You are trapped in a sinking glass cage. This wasn't a random accident. This was a failure to respect the hydrodynamics of floodwater. The survival instinct that said, "I can make it," was wrong. The science is merciless. Never enter floodwater. Not walking, not driving. Water weighs 62.4 pounds per cubic foot. A current moving at just a few miles per hour packs the kinetic energy of a tackle from a linebacker. If you are walking, 6 inches of fast-moving water can knock you off your feet. Once you fall, you are debris. You will be battered against obstacles, pinned under debris, or sucked into storm drains. The survival protocol is aggressive avoidance. If you see water on the road, turn around. If you are trapped in a building, move to the highest level, but do not climb into a closed attic unless you have a tool to cut through the roof. People drown in attics as the water rises, trapped by the shingles above them. You need to know your local topography. Flood maps are not suggestions, they are mortality clusters. If you live in a high-risk zone, your survival action happens days before the rain starts. You evacuate. You leave before the roads become rivers. But let's say you survive the water itself. You didn't drown, you stayed dry, the water recedes, you think the danger is over. This is the second phase of the flood killer. Floodwater is not just water. It is a slurry of sewage, industrial chemicals, dead animals, and sharp debris. It is a biological weapon. Research shows a massive spike in mortality for up to 60 days after a flood event. We see deaths from cardiovascular disease, respiratory infections, and gastrointestinal failure. The water leaves behind mold in the walls, black mold that colonizes your lungs. It leaves bacteria on every surface. People die weeks later because they cleaned their basement without a respirator, or because they drank from a contaminated tap. The flood disaster doesn't end when the sun comes out. It ends when the environment is sterilized. If you treat the aftermath like a cleanup project instead of a hazmat situation, you are exposing yourself to a delayed, invisible execution. Let's move to the silent killer. A heat dome settles over your city. It acts like a lid on a pot, trapping high pressure and hot air. The temperature climbs to 105, then 110, then 115 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't cool down at night. The asphalt absorbs the solar radiation all day and radiates it back all night. This is the urban heat island effect. Your apartment block is a thermal battery. The power grid, strained by millions of air conditioners running at max capacity, begins to wobble. Then the inevitable happens. The substation trips. The hum of the AC dies. Silence. Inside your home, the temperature begins to equalize with the outside. Within hours, your living room is 95 degrees. You are sweating, but the air is humid, so the sweat doesn't evaporate. You are sitting still, trying to conserve energy. You feel a headache starting. You tell yourself you are tough. You tell yourself it's just a little heat. You are wrong. Your body is entering a metabolic crisis. Heat kills quietly. It doesn't snap trees or shatter windows. It degrades your biology. The most dangerous reaction is denial. Older adults and people with heart conditions often stay in their homes, afraid to leave or assuming they can ride it out. They stop drinking water because they don't feel thirsty, a mechanism that fails as we age. As your core temperature rises, your heart has to pump faster to move blood to your skin for cooling. This puts an immense strain on the cardiovascular system. It is a stress test that lasts for days. You become confused, lethargic. You stop making rational decisions. You decide to take a nap. You might not wake up. Heat waves are the deadliest weather-related disaster in many regions, yet they trigger the least amount of urgency. People wait for the emergency to start, not realizing their own blood chemistry is the emergency. To survive this, you must understand the wet bulb temperature. This is the threshold where the air is so hot and humid that sweat cannot evaporate. At that point, a fan does nothing but blow hot air on you like a convection oven. If the grid fails, you cannot stay in a thermal trap. You must identify cooling centres, libraries, community halls, basements, before the heat hits. You need to hydrate aggressively, even if you aren't thirsty. You need to use evaporative cooling where possible, wet cloths, spray bottles, but only if the humidity allows it. Most importantly, you need to check on the vulnerable. The data shows that social isolation is a primary risk factor in heat deaths. Your neighbour dying of heat stroke isn't loud, they just fade away. If you don't have a plan for power outage cooling, you need to leave the city. Go to the coast, go to higher elevation. Treat the heat with the same respect you treat a hurricane. It is an atmospheric assault on your physiology. The twist in a modern heatwave is that it attacks the infrastructure we rely on to survive it. High heat sags power lines, causing them to arc and start wildfires. It buckles rail lines, stopping trains. It melts tarmac, grounding flights. You might plan to just drive away, but if the roads are gridlocked and your car overheats, you are now trapped in a glass box on a highway that is radiating heat at 140 degrees. This is a cascading failure. The heat causes the blackout. The blackout disables the pumps that move water. And suddenly you have no cooling and no tap water. Survival requires redundancy. Do you have a battery fan? Do you have stored water? Do you have a way to block out the sun from your windows? The heat dome is a test of your passive systems. If you rely 100% on the active grid, you are vulnerable. It is 3 a.m. You are asleep. The severe weather radio in the hallway blasts a tone designed by psychoacoustic engineers to induce anxiety. A robotic voice announces a tornado warning or a hurricane landfall imminent. Outside, the wind is howling, a low-frequency rumble that you feel in your chest. The trees are bending 45 degrees. Debris is hitting the siding of your house. Clack, thud, shatter. This is the early warning system, the EWS. It is one of the greatest scientific achievements of the last century. Networks of radar, satellites, and ocean buoys have coordinated to give you this specific window of time. But you are groggy. You look at your spouse. You look at the window. You think, is it really that bad? You check Twitter. You turn on the TV. You are wasting the most valuable commodity you have: seconds. The storm cell is moving at 60 miles per hour. While you are verifying the data, the hazard is closing the distance. We suffer from warning fatigue. If you live in a storm-prone area, you have heard the sirens before, and nothing happened. It was a false alarm. So you stay in bed. You assume the system is oversensitive. This is the false alarm paradox. Statistically, the system must be oversensitive to ensure it never misses a real event. But psychologically, this trains us to ignore it. The people who die in storms are often found in their beds or living rooms, not because they didn't hear the warning, but because they didn't respect it. They waited for visual confirmation. They wanted to see the funnel cloud or the storm surge before they moved. By the time you can see the monster, it is too late to react. The wind pressure is already sealing your doors shut. The roads are already blocked by fallen oaks. Waiting for confirmation is a death sentence. Survival is a reflex. When the warning sounds, the debate is over. You must have a pre-decided action plan. If it's a tornado, you go to the basement or an interior room without windows. You put on shoes, robust shoes, not flip-flops. If your house is destroyed, you will be walking on nails and glass. Put on a helmet if you have one. Head trauma is the leading cause of death in structural collapse. If it's a hurricane or flood warning and the order is to evacuate, you go, immediately. The roads have a finite capacity. If you wait until the rain starts, you will be trapped in traffic. The science shows that early evacuation is the single most effective survival behaviour for large storms. It removes the exposure variable from the equation entirely. Don't worry about looting. Don't worry about work. The house can be rebuilt. You cannot. The wind itself rarely kills you. It is what the wind is carrying. In a major storm, the air is filled with missiles. 2x4s, sheet metal, tree limbs, patio furniture. A piece of straw can pierce a telephone pole at high velocity. This is why you stay away from windows. This is why you protect your head. And after the storm passes, the danger shifts. Power lines are down, hiding in the water. Gas lines are ruptured. The structural integrity of your home is compromised. You step out to assess the damage, and a widowmaker branch falls from a tree. Or you step into a puddle that is electrified. The post-storm environment is a minefield. You need to maintain your situational awareness even when the wind dies down. The calm after the storm is deceptive. It is a landscape of potential energy waiting to release. Fast forward 2 weeks. The disaster is over. The news crews have packed up and gone to the next tragedy. You survive the event, but your home is red-tagged. Uninhabitable. You are now living in a temporary shelter. A stadium, a tent city, a gymnasium cot. It is loud. It smells of sweat and disinfectant. The toilets are overflowing. You are eating processed food with low nutritional value. You are stressed, sleep-deprived, and surrounded by coughing strangers. This is the moment where the long tail of disaster mortality begins to whip. You aren't fighting a fire anymore. You are fighting biology. Your immune system is suppressed by cortisol. You are exposed to new pathogens. This is not a camping trip. This is a public health crisis in a microcosm. The physical hazard is gone, but the vulnerability has skyrocketed. The mistake here is passivity. People wait for the government to fix it. They wait for the insurance check. They stay in the shelter because it is the official place to be. But research shows that prolonged stays in temporary camps are linked to higher long-term mortality. The density breeds disease. The lack of agency breeds depression. The selection effect takes hold. The strong find ways to leave. The vulnerable are left behind, creating a concentration of risk. If you view the shelter as a waiting room, you will deteriorate. You need to view it as a transition point. Your priority must be to secure stable housing, even if it means moving away, even if it means staying with distant relatives. You cannot rebuild your health in a disaster camp. Medical studies of survivors track a grim statistic: the 60-day mortality spike. After the initial adrenaline wears off, your body pays the bill. Heart attacks and strokes increase significantly in the 2 months following a major disaster. Chronic conditions, diabetes, hypertension, go unmanaged because pharmacies are closed or records are lost. A small cut from the cleanup becomes septic because you can't wash it properly. To survive the long term, you must become your own case manager. Keep your medical records digital and accessible. Maintain a supply of your essential medications. Prioritize sleep and hygiene as if they were tactical objectives. If you feel chest pain, do not dismiss it as stress. It is a physiological reaction to the trauma. The disaster tries to kill you quickly first. If that fails, it tries to kill you slowly. Here is the final twist. The biggest predictor of survival and recovery isn't your gear. It isn't your generator. It is your neighbours. Social cohesion. Communities that know each other, that trust each other, recover faster. They share resources. They check on the elderly. They clear debris together. Isolated individuals, even well-prepared ones, often fail. They burn out. They get overlooked by rescue teams. Science calls this social capital. It is a tangible asset during a crisis. If you are the grey man, the lone wolf, hiding in your bunker while the street floods, you are cutting yourself off from the primary survival mechanism of our species: cooperation. Your best prep might not be a new knife. It might be a conversation with the person living next door. Build your network before the grid goes down. When the ambulance can't come, your neighbour is your first response. Zoom out. Look at the Earth from space. You see bands of risk, the Pacific Ring of Fire, the hurricane belt in the Atlantic, the floodplains of the great delta rivers. Disaster is not evenly distributed. Some places are simply trying to kill you more than others. We often choose where to live based on jobs, or family, or scenery. We rarely choose based on the hazard map. But this is the ultimate strategic error. If you move to a coastline that is sinking while sea levels rise, you are buying a ticket to the event. If you build on a liquefaction zone, you are ignoring the geology. The science of natural disaster hotspots identifies clusters where mortality risk is orders of magnitude higher. You can be the most prepared person in the world, but if you position yourself in a geographic kill zone, you are fighting a losing war against physics. Normalcy bias tells us, it hasn't happened in my lifetime, so it won't happen. We build subdivisions in fire corridors. We put skyscrapers on fault lines. We pave over wetlands that used to absorb floods. We rely on engineering solutions like levees and seawalls, forgetting that every engineered system has a failure point. When we force civilization into high-hazard zones, we increase exposure. And when the 100-year event happens 3 times in a decade, we act surprised. We call it a tragedy. Nature calls it a correction. The most effective survival move you can make is extreme avoidance. It is unsexy, it is boring. But moving to a region with a high elevation, a stable water table, and low seismic activity is worth more than a bunker full of MREs. It's not just the land, it's the law. Building codes, emergency services, governance. A magnitude 7 earthquake in a region with strict seismic codes might kill 10 people. The same earthquake in a region with corruption and poor construction might kill 10,000. This is the development gap. Your survival depends on the invisible infrastructure around you. Does the fire department have funding? Do the bridges have retrofits? Is there a functional EWS? When you choose a place to live, you are hiring that local government to protect you. If they are incompetent or underfunded, you are on your own. You need to assess the institutional resilience of your location. A sturdy house in a fragile state is still a trap. You want to be in a place where the systems fail gracefully, not catastrophically. The map is changing. Climate change is the threat multiplier. It is expanding the zones of danger. Storms are getting stronger and wetter. Heat waves are getting longer. Wildfire seasons are becoming year-round. Areas that were once safe are now on the front lines. The historical data is no longer a perfect predictor of the future. You cannot look at the flood map from 1980 and feel secure. You need to look at the projections for 2030, 2050. The safe zones are migrating. Survival now requires adaptability. You must be willing to relocate if the data turns against your location. Do not fall in love with a piece of land that is trying to eject you. The Earth is dynamic. Your strategy must be dynamic. The science is clear. The era of stationary stability is ending. So, what do you do tomorrow? You don't need to build a doomsday vault. You need to stack small, evidence-based actions. First, information. Know your hazards. Sign up for the local alerts. Make sure your phone can scream at you when you are asleep. Second, supplies. Water is king. 3 days is the minimum, 2 weeks is the target. Food that doesn't need cooking. A first aid kit that you actually know how to use. Third, the plan. Where do you meet if the cell towers go down? Who picks up the kids? Write it down on paper. Digital systems fail, paper persists. Fourth, the practice. Run a drill. Turn off your main breaker and see if you can find a flashlight in the dark. Walk your evacuation route. The brain builds neural pathways through repetition. Under stress, you will not rise to the occasion, you will sink to the level of your training. We started this by saying disasters aren't acts of God, they are systems. And you are a system. Your goal is not just to survive, but to be a node of stability in the chaos. When you are prepared, you stop being a victim and you start being a resource. You stop adding to the vulnerability and start adding to the resilience. That is the ultimate survival flex. To be the person who doesn't need saving, but who can help save others. The science of survival isn't about fear. It is about competence. It is about staring at the indifference of nature and saying, I understand the rules and I am ready to play. The wind will blow, the ground will shake, the water will rise. These are inevitabilities. Your reaction to them is a choice. Make the right one. But there is one hazard we haven't discussed today, one that defies the standard models of wind and rain. What happens when the disaster isn't natural? What happens when the grid goes down not because of a storm, but because of a deliberate attack? The physics of starvation and cold remain the same, but the rules of engagement change completely. The timeline extends from days to years. The psychological strain shifts from recovery to endurance. We are currently compiling the research on long-term infrastructure collapse and the sociology of a world without power. It is a darker, more complex equation. If you want to be in the briefing room when we break down that scenario, you need to be subscribed. The next event might not come with a weather forecast. Stay watching. You survived the simulation. Now survive the reality. Equip yourself at the official supply depot. Because if the world is going to end, you might as well look prepared.